Welcome to Community Matters. This is your host, Becky Steinbruner, and I'm honored to be here with you for the next 2 hours. And I think I just went on the air again. So, welcome to Community Matters. This is your host, Becky Steinbruner, and I'm honored to be here with you this afternoon for the next 2 hours. I want to thank Satellite Workspace and Digital Media Center for having our studio here within their beautiful, quiet, clean, and very secure facility. Satellite Workspace and Digital Media Center is located at 325 Soquel Avenue in Santa Cruz. That's between Ocean Street and the lovely San Lorenzo River in Santa Cruz. It's a great place, very quiet, very clean. If you need a place to have a small meeting, they have workspaces available and meeting rooms available. They also have equipment that you can rent out, and if you want to make a podcast or something like that. Santa Cruz Voice shares this with patrons as well as community television. They're here too, another gem in our community. So stop by the first Wednesday of every month, and I think that could be week after next, is free. So you can come check it out, but you can come in anytime, make an appointment to have a tour. You have the ability to rent space by the hour, by the week, whatever you need. And it is a wonderful place, let me tell you. So, thank you to Satellite Work and Digital Media Center. We're here today for the next couple of hours. I'm honored to have the first guest here in the studio with me, Miss Karell Reeder. Hello, Karell. You want to say something into the microphone? About a fist away, and we'll do a sound test.
Well, hello, Becky, and thank you for having me here today. I'm really excited to share some information with our community.
Excellent. Thank you. Thank you for making the effort to brave that Highway 1 traffic and get here to Santa Cruz. It's always a pleasure to see you. Thank you. So, Karell, I asked Karell to come on today because there is something happening in Watsonville that people really need to know about. As you go down Highway 1 south in Watsonville, at the last exit for the city of Watsonville, it's Riverside Drive, off on your ocean side of the freeway, you see this 3-story old house that's kind of falling down and whatever, but it is a rich story there, and Karell has been very involved in efforts to try to preserve it for a very long time. There are moves afoot now by the County Historic Resources Commission, who is a group appointed by the County Board of Supervisors, to take it off any historic protection that it has, and Karell's going to describe that, and have it torn down. And I have a suspicion why, but we'll talk about that, and we invite you to call. After a little bit, I'm going to ask Karell to introduce herself and talk a little bit about her history with the Redman Hirahara property in Watsonville. That's on Lee Road. And you can call in a little later in the program and join our discussion. Karell, again, thank you. Welcome. Good to see you. Introduce yourself, please.
Well, I'm Karell Reeder, and I grew up in Corralitos. My family has been in the Pajaro Valley, some of them since the gold rush, and some of them on my Portuguese side since about the 1880s. And we farm out in the Corralitos area. We have apples. And I have a huge interest in local history and a great drive to bring history back into our awareness, because Watsonville seems like a sleepy little farm town, but the history of the area is remarkable for many reasons, and a lot of those reasons have to do with social justice, which is one of my favorite causes. I really believe in standing up for our people that have made Watsonville the rich and diverse community that it is. So I guess that's probably what first brought me into looking at the Redman Hirahara property. My first introduction was to the house when it was in its better days. Had to do with the Redman family, who were an early family that came to the valley, were very successful farmers, and of course, what I call the Golden Triangle was very active back in those 1860s, 1870s, where Watsonville was the breadbasket, if you will, of the early days of California. San Francisco was the financial center and the shipping center, and the gold fields were often where many of those families made their first fortune. So Watsonville was very central to that early history, and I was interested in the Redman family. And of course that house just stood out like a beacon, like, look at me, I'm beautiful, and I have a story. And I studied very deeply into the Redman family. There's some funny stories. I won't share those right now, but there were some funny stories about how that house was came to be. And then there were a lot of really sad stories about how it sort of lost its history, I guess you'd say. The second phase, though, of my interest started when a local group started to organize to save the house and preserve that land and keep that history of the Redmans alive. But as we delved into it further, the real history and the real significance of that house has to do with the Japanese internment period during World War II. When it became known then as the Hirahara home. The Hiraharas, I've studied quite a bit about their story. They're a fascinating Japanese history story. They established themselves here. They were immigrants, like we often talk about in the Pajaro Valley. They were immigrants, and then they had their first generation born here. They took that house as their base of operations for their farming, and they were quite successful. But as many of you may know, at the beginning of World War II, after the bombing of Pearl Harbor, the Hiraharas and many, many others, we've heard the number 120,000 Japanese people were displaced and taken to the internment camps all through the West because they were considered at that time, wrongly, a threat to our national security. And the Hiraharas basically had to pack up one suitcase, probably per person, and climb on a bus, and were hauled off and basically quartered, I think, at the Monterey fairgrounds, and then shipped off. And they weren't shipped off to the camps that we all know of. They were shipped off to one of the lesser known camps. I don't think any of them went to Tule Lake. I don't think any of them went to Manzanar. And I don't believe any went to Heart Mountain, but they went to one of the other camps, which I think was one of the ones in Colorado. Nonetheless, it was horrific. The living conditions in those internment camps was beyond what could be considered humane. And the Hiraharas survived, I think it was 3 years in the camp. And the fascinating part of this story that we know, and I'm always open to other people sharing their knowledge of it too, but the fascinating part of the story is the Hiraharas, unlike a lot of the other Japanese Americans that were interned, came back. And Watsonville, bless our heart, that town stood by the Hiraharas, and several people all pitched in to save their house and save their land. So when they came back, they had something where the rest of the families had been basically robbed of their land and along with their rights, along with any basically, worth. everything was taken from them. The Hiraharas generously had a few buildings on the property that allowed some of those other families to camp on the Redman Hirahara property until they could get established and get a place of their own. And that time period was still very raw. The World War II local people in Pajaro Valley were more open and more kind to the Japanese returning, but other communities were still very much persecuting any Japanese, whether they were citizens, native born, whatever. The signs were in windows of stores. People would step aside from them on the street. They would be labeled and called names. We see this even today. We see groups that are misunderstood or misaligned, and they get that same treatment now. So we haven't learned too much from this experience. But the Hiraharas got back into farming, and they had quite a good-sized family. From what I understand now, where they are, they have dispersed. And it had to do with the 89 earthquake. The 89 earthquake supposedly damaged the house to where it was condemned, but it wasn't that seriously damaged. There seemed to have been a little conflict between members of the family that it would be better to let the house be condemned and then move their older generation into one of the family's homes or into a care facility. And that was kind of why the house wound up with investors that wanted to possibly develop that whole 14-acre parcel along the highway. And that's where the Redman Hirahara Foundation stepped up and said, well, let's try to save this house, because this story is an extraordinary story. Indeed. Of tolerance, of respect for people of diverse backgrounds. And Watsonville can be really proud of that, because we know other places weren't so kind. Yeah. So this started in the late 90s. We worked very hard to bring interest and attention to the story. One of the first things we felt we needed to do was get the house on the National Historic Register, which, irregardless of who owned the land, the house could be somewhat protected by having standing on that list. And we had to do quite an extensive photo summary, historic stories, interviews, and put that all together in an application, and that application was accepted. It was quite a bit of work, and it was accepted, and the house went on to the National Historic Register and has had that standing since then. But what we're finding now is that our local electeds maybe don't appreciate the history, don't appreciate the story, and they're willing to pull the house off and demolish it. And that's heartbreaking.
It is indeed.
Heartbreaking. The house is not in the best shape. It's been 20 years since I really actually have been in the house. But just looking at it weathering there in the field, I can tell you that it would take a monumental effort to save it. But it's also such a very relevant story to how we treat immigrants and how we feel about ourselves and how we can be more charitable and more tolerant of one another. So that's, I think, the main gist of what the house represents, more so than just a piece of Victorian architecture.
Yeah, indeed. You mentioned that the Watsonville people saved the home and farmland for them. Can you describe how they did that?
Somewhat. Once they were interned, all their bank accounts, everything were frozen. So there was no way that the Japanese families, any of them, could pay their taxes on their property. But what was arranged through the kindness of one of our local attorneys was that he would take the house as a project, I guess, and take possession and pay the taxes on it so that it could be returned back when they were allowed to leave the camps. So it was one man, but also a community that saw to it that there was something left for those people when they came back.
Can you share with us the name of the attorney who really headed that up?
I have that in some records because I did a pretty thorough document on it, but I don't have it right off the top of my head.
Yeah. Nonetheless, it was a community-wide effort, and something for which the people of Watsonville should really be very proud and want to preserve and showcase.
Right.
And yet, here it is. The foundation tried very hard, and the foundation raised it up off the foundation.
We did.
Raised a bunch of money. Can you talk with us a little bit about that?
Yeah. Well, it seemed, which things strike me funny about things in the Pajaro Valley and Santa Cruz County. It shouldn't be controversial to try to save an old house, especially one with such an amazing history. But we struggled with, and actually wound up competing with other projects that were going on at the same time for historical preservation. But we were able to raise enough money to have engineers look at the house. One of the things that we noticed right off is foundations were not very sophisticatedly engineered back in the day, and there was...
And this is the 1800s, right? That it was built?
Yes. It wasn't mud sill, but it was, they had a kind of a stone and mortar foundation under the house. And the house was structurally quite sound 20 years ago, but we had noticed that from one of the engineering reports that there was a major beam or joist running through the main center of the house that was maybe starting to fail. And if it did fail, that would be a structural catastrophe. So what we did, and working with Fresno movers, we came in and built cribbing, kind of dismantling that stone and mortar perimeter foundation, and went in and put cribbing under the house to preserve it and keep that major joist from failing. So there's quite a bit holding that house up. It hasn't caved in yet, though it looks pretty rough right now. There's still enough structure there to make it sound. So the interior, by the way, of that house was exquisite. Hardwoods, it was built mainly with local woods and materials, but they imported hardwoods in that were just gorgeous, and it was at one time like a little gem. And I don't know how much of that still exists inside because of the weathering, but it was, to walk through it, you could just have this great sense of the history.
Yeah. The Redman family was a very wealthy family, and from what I've read, hung out a lot with the likes of Frederick Heen and Klaus Spreckels, and it was a high society place, and I'm sure that they entertained there quite a lot.
Yeah, and there's great stories about how James Redman, who was the builder of the house, he built it for his wife as a gift. She came from a pretty prominent family out of San Francisco, his first wife. They were brewers, of all things, in San Francisco, and she consented to marry him and move to Watsonville, which was maybe in their family's eyes a step down. But he built her this beautiful house.
Designed by William Weeks.
Yeah, one of the most famous and very renowned architects. And he put tons of love into that house for her. And then sadly, she died fairly young. Frederica was her name. She died fairly young of, I think it was kidney failure. And so he lost his wife and then married again. And there's a lot of tragedy after that too. But it was I could just see a man wanting to impress his wife's family and making them feel like they were parting with their daughter, even though she was moving to a little, village outside the big
town.
city.
Yeah. Well, things do change, don't they?
Yes.
But what I think I am mourning is the possibility that this would just go away. you and I have worked over the years, after the foundation had dissolved, to try to do something to save it. You and I went to Congressman Panetta's office,
Right.
and tried to get him to help us. The Tutt family purchased the land, that land and the land across Lee Road, and somehow I suspect that they didn't really anticipate having the Redman Hirahara house and property protected by the National Registry, which is a big deal.
Right.
It is significant. And they have, in effect, let it demolish itself by neglect.
Mm-hmm.
And because I attend the Santa Cruz County Historic Resources Commission meetings, I do know that the commission tried very hard to get the County Board of Supervisors to approve a new rule for a county that would help preserve places like this by passing a demolition by neglect ordinance that would require owners of properties like this to at least put a tarp on the roof.
Mm-hmm.
The Board of Supervisors would have none of it, and that was very disappointing.
Right. And one of the interesting things of the political struggle with the House has been that the House is in the county.
Yeah.
However, it is adjacent to the boundaries of the city.
Yeah.
And it's been almost unnegotiable between the two entities, the two jurisdictions, to do anything with the property. It doesn't fit any particular zoning in the county, really, and then it's not in the city, so the city has kind of half interest in it, or has had half interest in it, but now that is changing, isn't it, Becky?
In a big way.
Right. So the Redman property, the Redman Hirahara property, as it exists now, is about 14 acres. It's currently, as I remember, zoned agricultural or commercial agriculture. And it is adjacent to the boundary of the city. And then just a year and a half or 2 years ago, we had our Measure U that set our boundaries for the city of Watsonville, voted for by the people. Was a huge majority saying that let's protect our farmland and let's keep these boundaries consistent with where they have been in the past 20 plus years. And that would leave the Redman Hirahara property once again as a county property. So the city, however, and through, we think, political pull, there has been a move to try and now go past the existing boundary that was established by the people and include that property, the 14 acres of the Redman Hirahara, and then another 40-some acres outside the city's current boundaries. This is being looked at as part of the 2050 general plan for the city. So we haven't got a really good grasp yet of how all of that is going to shake out. But it's evident that the people that own the property, the Tutt family, would like to see that land developed. And we thought at first it would be a box store. That was kind of the hot topic of, well, we'll just knock the house down and we'll put another box store in. The latest scuttlebutt, if you want to call it that, is that the intent is to make that a gateway for Watsonville, which I actually think has always been a pretty good idea. But the gateway that's being discussed kind of in the back rooms is that it would be another outlet center like Gilroy has. And I'm just kind of adamantly opposed to that whole idea. And there's several reasons why. One is, do we really need another Gucci outlet store in Watsonville? Or do we need another Louis Vuitton type of bargain center in our town? And I don't think we do. I don't think that is the best use for a gateway for Watsonville. I think, and this is my opinion, and I've put it out there to many, many people, I think a gateway for Watsonville needs to include the companies and the businesses that we are very, very proud of here. And those businesses are our wineries, our strawberry growers, our
organic apple farms,
our farming community.
Duval.
If we have a gateway, I think we should support the businesses who started here, and who have made a name for themselves here, and are known worldwide. And I'm talking about Lakeside Organics. I'm talking about Granite. I'm talking about Driscoll strawberries and our other nature ripe berries. I think
Martinelli.
Thank goodness. Thank you, Becky. Martinelli's, because I think that business has just grown from ground up and gone international. Why don't we promote what we already have here as part of our history and part of our economy? And I don't think we need to be sending money to Gucci and Louis Vuitton and maybe Navy. I mean, it just seems like if you want to promote your tourist business and you're proud of your history, put it out there. And if the house could be a centerpiece for that, and also a voice to how wonderful this community has been to our immigrant communities. Not that I have to take some of that back. I know that I went through the controversial eras where we did exploit people, and it was pretty bad during some of those early days. But I think we can talk about the good things that we did, and that house represents that.
That's a true gateway to the Pajaro Valley. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Open heart, good-natured, good, hardworking people. Why not celebrate that? I think that's what we need to say there. Yeah,
I agree with you. For those of you listening, I'm talking with Karell Reeder, a wonderful farmer, historic activist, and a great gem in our community. Karell spent the money and the time to get her own barn on her farm listed historically for preservation, because you appreciate what that is and what it means to the community, Karell. So I want to thank you. We're talking about the Redman Hirahara house. That is the 3-story house that is in pretty bad shape. At the last exit for Watsonville by Riverside Drive on the ocean side, where there is a move afoot now to take it off of the National Historic Registry of places that has protected it all this time, and demolish it. This is all being pushed along with the help of the Santa Cruz County Historic Resources Commission and the planner, Mr. Matthew Sunt, that oversees that. And I have to agree that I think this is being pushed along with the impetus of Watsonville City annexing this area into the Gateway Project. If you want to see what that map looks like, if you take a look at the 2050 Watsonville City Plan Update, in Attachment 4, you'll see the map that shows all of these areas that the city plans to annex. And I will be curious to see how that goes, considering Measure U, what the voters have approved. I'm going to invite callers. I goofed up here a little bit, and I disconnected our technology that allows you to call in. So let's try it here. You're going to hear some voices that are not mine. Oh, I just disconnected again. I'm sorry. Karell, why don't you go ahead and continue talking about what you know about the city of Watsonville's plan, the Gateway Plan more, or what people can do to try to get involved and make this go a different way. Any investors?
Well,
what can we do?
Yeah, I think an investor that would step up and see this vision would be a remarkable thing, because this is not just going to be a quick decision, thank goodness. We think that there will be a real process to shaping this 2050 general plan. And it will, there's no doubt, Watsonville needs to grow. We need to grow, but we also need to protect what we value, which is our farmland and our sense of community and our history and our sense of identity. So we always hope that our city council is treasuring, I guess, those things as much as the community seems to when they have to go to the polls and vote. But that isn't always the case. So what we would hope, I think, is that through this process there will be meetings, there will be discussions at council meetings, and we would love if people would take a more activist role and decide what they want their city to be and to look like in 2050 or, after 2050, because the plan will start probably 2050. Mm-hmm. So I won't be here probably for that. I don't know.
Oh, sure you will.
My family, my legacy probably is we don't make it into those 90s and 100s. But I would love to be around to see that the city does maintain its charm, its character, and its history, and still be a vital and economic engine for our surrounding farms and surrounding agriculture. So I think if we could just get people to go to some of these meetings, look and be on mailing lists and email lists, so they're aware of where these decisions are supposedly going to be shaped and made, that would be huge. And if somebody with some really, healthy bank accounts wanted to step up and make an offer on that property and make it into the gateway that I think would do the most for our community and do the right thing, that would be the extra good thing. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Fortunately, I'm a little farmer. I can't quite do it all by myself. So,
well, I wonder if any of our listeners have any inroads with Driscoll, Lakeside, Martinelli. Maybe it's time for the Watsonville community businesses to pull together money and save again the Redman Hirahara house.
Yeah.
I'm going to connect us to a call-in studio, and I apologize. There'll be some voices that are not mine.
Ready to connect. Click connect to show now. You are connected as the host.
Okay.
Welcome, host. You are now in the host room and can manage your callers from the call-in studio web interface. Okay. Audio recording is on. Dual channel.
Okay, here we are. Now you can call in if you like out there in the listening audience. Here's the number. It's 831-265-5050. Call in, please, and join the conversation. Maybe you're one of those investors who would like to raise your hand right now and save the Hirahara house again, the pride of the Watsonville people, big heart and accepting of all people in our community and preserving that story for the generations to come. I'm here with Karell Reeder, a farmer and a political activist and lover of historic preservation. Yep. So call in and join the conversation, please. 265-5050. We'll be here for another 20 minutes. So I want to let you know, Karell, that before I came here, I was looking at the Santa Cruz County Board of Supervisors meeting agenda for next Tuesday, and on it is, in the consent agenda number 61, they're going to have a public hearing May 20th about implementing the Mills Act. So, and it's a resolution to implement the Mills Act. That may be the same meeting that the Board of Supervisors considers taking the Redman Hirahara house off of the National Historic Registry. What I understand is that that is scheduled to happen sometime next month. It could be either at their May 6th meeting or at the May 20th meeting. There are two Santa Cruz County Board of Supervisor meetings in the month of May. But from Mr. Sant, I've been told that it could likely come the early May meeting. it was disappointing to me. Let me just finish that thought. People need to show up at both of those meetings, May 6th and May 20th. You can watch what is on the Santa Cruz County Board of Supervisors agendas. They're posted usually by Friday. Sometimes you can't see all of the staff reports and documentation, but you can at least get an idea of what they're going to talk about. Show up and call in if you can't be there on a Tuesday at 9 a.m. fighting your way through traffic and looking for a parking place once you get there. It's important. It's important that we do get involved in these things, like you've said, Karell, because our voices matter. I will stick with that no matter what people say. Our voices matter, and the more of us that are speaking out, the better it is. Mm-hmm. So, before we move on, I'd like you to talk a little bit about what the Mills Act is and why this matters. But before we do that, I want to just say that it has been disappointing to me, again, that I have, as part of the February 18th Santa Cruz County Historic Resources Commission meeting. Now, these are people, one from each supervisorial district that has been appointed by the supervisor of that district to be the eyes and ears of the public and the liaisons with the Board of Supervisors to protect and preserve our historic and cultural resources. And at the February 18th Historic Resources Commission meeting, there was a discussion and a staff report, and they offered to pay $600 out of the commission's own budget.
Which is very small, actually.
Which is incredibly small. I have been at their meetings when they paid out of their own pockets to have a table at the county historic fair because there wasn't money in the budget. And here they were saying, we'll pay that $600 to have an engineer come out and establish that this Redman Hirahara house is a public nuisance. And they voted to have that done. I have in the February 18th agenda packet, there is a letter. It is undated by Matthew Sant. He is the Senior Policy Planner and staff member for the Historic Resources Commission. And it is to Mr. Juggy Tutt, who is one of the owners of Elite Developments in Watsonville. That's the owner currently of the Redman Hirahara house and property, as well as the very large hotel and strip mall, the Starbucks that you see on the other side of Lee Road. Here is the letter that it begins with, Dear Mr. Tutt, the Santa Cruz County Historic Resources Commission is in the process of updating the county's historic inventory and has reviewed the condition of the Redman Hirahara house and concluded that it should be removed from the county's historic inventory and the National Register of Historic Places. And then goes on to say that it's going to cost $518.15 for a county building inspector to come out and make the necessary evaluations that will be needed to send on to the state historic preservation department to submit as proof that the Redman Hirahara house should be delisted from the National Historic Register. And that's disappointing to me that the commission voted to take that action and was willing to pay for it. I was told, I did not attend this meeting. Mr. Sant informed me later he forgot to add me on the notification list that the meeting was happening. And since many of the citizen commissions are being dissolved, some of them are really changing their meeting frequency so that there are now only 3 commission meetings, Historic Resources Commission and others too, when they have been meeting much more regularly. So I learned about that, and I also learned that the evaluation was done by the county building official. The building official essentially filled out paperwork that declared it is not a habitable structure. Well, of course it isn't. Of course it isn't, but that's not what you're trying to establish when you're asking it to be delisted from the National Historic Registry. It's more things like structural and architectural integrity. Now, given that the Tuts have allowed it to be severely neglected, not even trying to keep the water from going in through the roof, it is in sore shape. But the proof that the County Resources Commission accepted to make this now determination to send to the County Board of Supervisors next month that it be taken off the National Historic Registry is pathetic and inadequate. The man that did it is not even registered as an archaeological evaluator. He used to be. He's not anymore. His name is Mr. Kent Seavey from Pacific Grove, and he wrote a letter to Matthew Sunt on January 5th saying, "Yep, it's in pretty bad shape, and here are some YouTube videos." He never went into the structure, and I suspect the building inspector never did either. They just walked around, and it's amazing all the times you and I have tried to get a hold of the Tuts to come talk with us, to go talk with them. No response. What do you know? The Tuts showed up and met the building inspector, and they kicked a few tires, and, well, here we are. Right. It's just ready to fall down any minute. It's a public nuisance, but it is a non-habitable structure. And the videos are from the public domain. They were not taken. There was nothing taken, examined, no videos, nothing inside the building.
And just an interesting aside on this, Becky, especially now that we're talking about structural integrity and the history and how that ties in. If you study the National Historic Register, and you are a person like me that is a very big advocate for social justice, there are buildings throughout the United States, a good number of them, I would say, in the South, that were, for instance, slave quarters that are not habitable. And they look pretty raw. And they have, fortunately, people in the communities that value and want to preserve the truth about how we handled our social justice issues back in the day, that will step up and will actually work to preserve buildings like this that have great history, great social justice ties, and aren't very pretty and aren't habitable, but they are significant in the story that they tell. And the fact that they have managed to exist to this very day is sometimes quite extraordinary. So it really doesn't seem to be so critical that the building be beautiful or restored or brought into some kind of economic use. It is often the fact that that building has just survived to represent and tell a story. And I want to share something here that I think is pretty significant too, that's personal. We don't always appreciate in the Pajaro Valley the importance of our Japanese American community. If you go through any of our farming businesses and many of our other businesses, you will see that the families that have existed here, the Nagaminis, the Sakais, the Katos, the Katsuyamas, are hallmarks of what a great diverse community we are. In my own family, I have still 17 acres of apple orchard in Corralitos, And one of the reasons I have that still is thanks to the Shakuma family that came back from the internment camp. And when my grandfather died at 1947 after the war, and my grandmother was left alone with just my uncle to try and subsist on our farming efforts, and it wasn't viable for her to try to farm, the Shakuma family leased our land and grew strawberries on it. And because of that lease and because of that income, my grandmother was able to hang on to our farmland. And she talked over and over again about how wonderful the Shakuma family was and how they had stepped up, and it was a very good relationship. I mean, they actually would, bring desserts over for dinner on Sunday night. I mean, it was a very, very close relationship. And I wouldn't be farming now if it weren't for a Japanese American community or Japanese American family that came back and wanted to get another foothold and another start on being an agricultural producer in this valley. So I just want there to be some recognition of how important our Japanese Americans are here, and the house represents that. So it may not be pretty and it may not be in great shape, but there is a story there that really needs to be told.
Yeah, indeed. Indeed. There is a place similar in San Jose called the Emma Prush Farm Park, where it's also a Victorian home that was given to the city of San Jose with a large agricultural acreage. And it has been turned into, with the help of a foundation, Emma Prush Farm Park. And it supports, the house is used partly as a Head Start facility, but also as an event center. If people want to have weddings or special gatherings there, they can rent the house for a reasonable fee. And that, to me, is the model for what the Hirahara house could be. It could be self-supporting. It could be supporting the community that lives here and showcasing what the Pajaro Valley really is. And again, this amazing story that the people of the Pajaro Valley banded together and saved the home and farm for the Japanese American family, the Hiraharas, and in turn the Hiraharas had a place to offer to others. The barn that has now fallen down was made into apartments. That has been, artifacts from that have been cataloged by Cabrillo College archaeological professor Rob Edwards and his students. There's a UCSC student, Jacob Stone, that did his thesis, again cataloging a lot of the pottery and things that were found, newspaper clippings from the World War II time when the families came back and put newspapers up for insulation. And these things, once they're gone, they're gone. Mm-hmm. And I just don't feel that putting a plaque on a rock does the job. And that's the answer that we're given from the Historic Resources Commission. I met with their leader and Mr. Sant. Well, we can put up a nice interpretive plaque. It isn't the same. And it has no value when people go there because it's just a rock.
Yeah, the context is gone.
Exactly.
And with the context, the story pretty much diminishes.
Yes. If you have any thoughts about historic preservation, we've got about 5 minutes left. This time went quickly. Please call us, 265-5050. In that time, Karell, maybe you can tell us what the Mills Act is and why this is such a big deal.
I am not an expert on that, Becky. Get me started.
Okay. Well, I only know about it because I attend Santa Cruz County Historic Resources Commission meetings and have been for quite a while. There at one time was a commissioner, Susie Miriam, on that commission representing the first district appointed by John Leopold. She had a real root in history. Her father had instigated that, and she loves and loved history enough to do research on the demolition by neglect ordinance. She had it all ready to go. The commission reviewed it, approved it, and sent it off to the Board of Supervisors. The board would not approve it. They would not put any teeth to preserve these sorts of buildings where the owner is letting them fall down. She also researched the Mills Act, which is the ability for people who own historic properties like this, if they preserve the building in the historic context, they get a huge reduction in property taxes. Huge reduction. It's called the Mills Act. She also, at that time, suggested that the Board of Supervisors implement that, and they didn't. But now they are. And that's coming up. It's on a consent agenda item for next Tuesday, April 29th, Santa Cruz County Board of Supervisors, on the consent, just to establish the date of May 20th as a public hearing for this, for a resolution to implement the Mills Act. So that could mean people who own a historic barn like you do. You could get a reduction in your property taxes if you preserve your barn. It could mean property owners like the Bayview Hotel in Aptos Village. Her property taxes are almost $28,000 a year. But if this act goes through, it is possible that whoever owns it, it is now up for sale. Whoever owns the Bayview Hotel or historic buildings like this could get a great reduction in property tax as an incentive to preserve these buildings. So if you own a historic building out there, you listeners, you might want to contact your supervisor and encourage them to pass the Mills Act in Santa Cruz County and find out how it could give you help. Do you think it would help you with your farm?
I haven't, we are already under the Williamson Act, so we already have a pretty nice reduction because it's locked into farming and agriculture. But I could look at it and see if we can get another little chunk. When you're a farmer, every dollar counts.
Every bit helps.
I should mention here too, though, Becky, along parallel to that there are huge, and things are changing by the minute, I know, and financially things from our government are up in the air. But in the past, there have been huge incentives for corporations to repurpose old buildings, and there's been money available to find new uses and money for restoration to basically bring these old buildings back up to a usable standard and an economic use. And it's hard to say how that will all shake out now with our government, but it's something to consider, that possibly there's money out there that could be utilized to bring that property up to a new economic use.
If anyone knows anyone like that could step in and help us save the Redman Hirahara house in Watsonville, please contact me here at Community Matters. And I really want to thank you, Karell Reeder, for joining us this afternoon. I hope to see you at the Board of Supervisors meeting for the Redman Hirahara house. Thank you.
My pleasure.
So now we're off the air.
We didn't get any callers, darn. But hopefully.
Well, hopefully it isn't, because sometimes I goof up and I don't see any on the thing.
There's like a little.
I haven't seen any up at the top. So anyway, we'll have you back. You can talk about organic farming if you want.
Oh, I love talking about any of that.
Battery fire stuff.
Yeah, I would love the chance to discuss that whole situation with the lithium thing, because I think we're out ahead of it this time.
I hope so, but we've got to keep it on the radar because the supervisors are not with us on this.
Well, the thing is that the money flows, Becky. You know
Yeah.
it as well as I do. The money flows just even on this issue.
Yeah.
I'm sure Tuts have slid a few campaign contributions
That's
over.
what I think.
And
It's in Kim DeSerpa, and she has no interest in it. Well, she said, I talked with Kevin Newhouse, and he thinks it's in pretty bad shape, and we'll just put up some kind of a monument. She's clueless.
Well, and I don't know how long she's really lived in the community. She's almost, I think, maybe almost what I would consider a newcomer. So, of course, history may not mean a lot to her.
I think she doesn't care about history.
Yeah, which is...
She put Barry Swenson's vice president as their planning commissioner, for heaven's sake. I have to let my next guest in.
Oh, I will depart in this time. But yes, we will talk more. We should talk about organic farming, and we should talk about batteries.
Yes, that will be good. Thank you. I'd like you to...
She's our one.
I'll give you her email address right now if you want.
Well, let's put it in my phone.
Come on in when you're ready, John.
I'll get it to Becky, and Becky will shoot it to me. We won't hang you out.
Okay.
I'll see you then.
Thank you.
What a nice place this is for you.
This is nice, isn't it? This is
I'm
what
gonna put a piece
grows.
of notepaper. I'll write Jenny's email address.
Oh,
Pass
yes.
it on to her.
That would be great. Let me get that. Thank you so much.
This isn't.
Ah, there's Lyra.
Hi, Lyra.
Hey, so I could hear you guys talking.
Oh,
Becky. I think I was listening to on air, so I just wanted to let you guys know that was happening.
Okay, thanks.
Okay,
All right, bye-bye.
bye.
Did you hear that?
I did. Okay, so let's see if this will call back.
Hello?
Hello, Lyra, can you hear me?
I can.
Excellent, thank you. Thanks for the heads up. I didn't know that we were still being heard. Usually it goes off the air, so thank you.
Well, luckily you guys were just like, John was like, I'll give you her email. Or it was like, it was like all very mellow.
Thank you.
Was it like, can you believe what they're planning? Like, just like, I don't know.
Oh my goodness. Well, thank you for being
course.
taking time today to be here, and John, thank you. There are headphones there if you want to be able to hear what Lyra says, and you want to talk, Lyra, and see if he can hear you.
Can you hear me, John?
Yes, I hear you very well.
Okay,
Woohoo.
excellent. Thank you. Thank you so much. I'm going to put this mic over here. Which one do you want to use? This one or?
I'm comfortable with
Okay.
either one.
All right. Very good. We've got about a little less than a minute before we go on the air. So thank you both so much for taking time to be on today. Are the questions that I sent you okay?
Of course. Oh, yeah.
No,
Okay.
That's great.
Okay, very good. And feel free to add in whatever you want. Do you want to accept calls?
Sure.
Okay, very
Yeah.
good.
Why not?
All right, yeah, that'll be good. All right, we've got about 25 seconds. I have to tell you, I get very nervous during these programs, so I'm sorry if I'm a little flustered, but I'm really grateful
Oh, no,
for
don't
you
worry.
both being
No,
here.
We get
no,
nervous
no.
too, of course.
Yeah. Well, and you're just off 1 hour and going right into another hour. So
Yeah.
Okay, here we go. Welcome to Community Matters. Thank you for carrying on into the second hour here. And I want to thank my former guest, previous guest, Karell Reeder, for coming in and talking about the Redman Hirahara property and what's coming along the road with that. Our second hour is going to be fabulous also. I'm honored here to have in the studio Mr. John Hall, and joining us via phone is Lira Filippini, both of whom are integral movers and shakers in the area. In Santa Cruz City, formed a group, Our Downtown, Our Future, and I'm going to ask that they introduce themselves. We'll be talking about what's going on in downtown Santa Cruz these days. They've certainly got their finger on the pulse. John, would you introduce yourself?
sure. My name's John Hall. I'm a research professor in the sociology department at UC Santa Cruz and UC Davis. And with Lira, I am the co-chair of Our Downtown, Our Future.
Thank you. Lira, can you tell us a bit about yourself, please?
Sure. Well, Lira Filippini, spent a lot of time living in Santa Cruz over multiple different rounds. And one of the reasons I think John and I like each other so much is that I graduated from UC Santa Cruz with a degree in sociology,
Yes.
but currently work as like an artist, web designer, and grant writer. And very happy to be here talking about the future of Santa Cruz, because community is the most important thing we can put our efforts into.
Isn't that the truth? Thank you. Thank you both for being here today and for all that you do out in the community. I really appreciate you.
Thank you for having us, and thank you for having this show. It's an important.
Yeah. I'm very grateful that Santa Cruz Voice has been able to continue on a forum for local issues. Yeah. Thank you. Tell us a little bit about the group Our Downtown, Our Future, and how it came to be, all of that. John, do you want to start? And then you and Lyra can tag team.
Sure. So I think it's fair to say that I first moved to Santa Cruz in 2011 and was also commuting back to Davis until about 2015. But when I first got here, I saw the farmers market on Lot 4, and I thought, boy, there's not a lot of open space in downtown Santa Cruz. And that's just an asphalt-covered parking lot. Why don't they change that into a park, which is what what the city of Davis did in the late 1980s. Beautiful, very successful farmers market in a park now, Central Park. Mm. So, and I raised that with various people in politics, and thereby got sucked into politics, and sucked into helping to start a group called Downtown Commons Advocates, which was advocating for creating a park on Lot 4, where the existing farmers market is, and having a permanent structure and facility for the farmers market. And then when the city, and this gets to, I don't want to go too far into this because it gets into your other questions that we want to talk about, but when the city decided that they were going to build a new library instead on Lot 4, Our Downtown, Our Future was founded as an organization to launch a ballot initiative to provide an alternative way of meeting the same goals in city planning in Santa Cruz. Lyra, what do you think?
Yeah. I think what's really interesting about our group's formation and the ballot measure that came out of it is that it really was kind of a collaborative thing between a whole bunch of different organizations where certain people were kind of in like maybe two out of the like 6 or 7 organizations that came together. And so it was really easy to all kind of find each other and realize that there were overlapping interests. So we had like the Sierra Club, who was really concerned about how terrible it is for the environment, like the carbon footprint of not reusing buildings that are still very viable, and cutting down trees, whatnot. And then there was the Downtown Commons advocates that was like, this is the perfect place to have a farmer's market and actually create a plaza, like a piazza, and right there on Lot 4. And then there was Don't Bury the Library, who is like just very focused on the beautiful historical, roots of the library on the location that it is right now, right there with City Hall and the Civic Auditorium. And, there was just a number, and there were a couple of other organizations as well. There were a number of organizations that just realized that when the city created this plan to build a new library with a parking lot, because that was another big one, was Campaign for Sustainable Transportation, and this idea of like this very large concrete, parking lot that a lot of the data shows, or could be interpreted to show, as we believe, that we don't actually need one, and we're not going to, especially if we implement better practices for transportation throughout the city. And, this plan that the city had to combine all these elements on Lot 4, which we thought was the best place to have an actual downtown plaza, just brought all these organizations together with this shared goal of like, we want to see vibrancy and good decision making for the future of our community, and that includes the actual decisions that are made for what becomes the physical attributes that shape our community, as well as the shape of the process by which we get to those decisions. And it was a little bit of it was a complicated measure that we created and we did not pass, we did not win. And it was a complicated measure trying to bring all these things together. But what came out of it was a lot of community building and realizing that we all really cared about, overlapping shared goals, even if we had different focuses.
Yeah, I would say that we got about 42% of the vote, which, of course, close but no cigar, and not all that close. But still, it shows that a sizable number, more than 2 out of 5 people, despite a very misleading campaign in opposition, they got it, and they understood that there is a better way to do city planning in Santa Cruz. It's a terribly haphazard process, I must say, as to how they came to the final plan for what they're doing on Lot 4. Many years ago, in the early 2000s, they wanted to have just a parking garage there. They had this sort of leftover from the 20th century, let's have a shopping mall downtown kind of idea, and the idea was put the parking garage behind Pacific Avenue. And then that failed utterly in the financial collapse of 2008, 2009. And then Measure S, when it passed, which was to fund renovation of libraries. And, if necessary, new libraries. But it was quite clear that it wasn't necessary because they actually came up with a plan that would have renovated the downtown library, and that's what their initial campaign for Measure S. Nothing before in the campaign for Measure S said anything about building a new library, much less on Lot 4. And so then that didn't really fly in 2016 to 2018 to build a parking garage with the new library sitting underneath it. People just, it was an anathema, really. And then they added in affordable housing as a sweetener. And so, this was just a process of, it wasn't a process of planning. It was a process of throwing spaghetti on the wall and seeing if anything stuck.
Yes. And do you think, maybe let me back up a bit. For maybe people who are not familiar with Lot 4, describe for us a little bit what Lot 4 is, what it looks like, and where it is, just backing up a little bit. Because people can listen from anywhere in the world to our program.
All right.
So they may not know exactly where.
Lira, you're more poetic in descriptions than I am. You should.
Well, I would say, especially for people who are not familiar with the streets of downtown Santa Cruz, there's a center, downtown street that has a lot of really lovely history actually, and has gone through a couple of rounds of kind of revitalization because of our earthquake history.
Yeah.
And that's Pacific Avenue, and they call it the Pacific Avenue Mall. And one street over, so parallel to Pacific, is the street that Lot 4 is on. And it is a very sizable lot. It is currently, as John described earlier, primarily just a parking lot, but with beautiful, very large, established heritage trees that are quite healthy. There's one, the biggest one, actually my favorite, unfortunately, is this magnolia that is not doing very well. But it was doing really well up until they started doing the tree study to kind of try to convince us that the trees weren't worth saving. That's a whole other rabbit hole we could go down with the heritage tree ordinance and what it means with the trees. But the trees themselves, I would say, are, they're not considered infrastructure, but a lot of us, in our experiences over decades of gathering on Lot 4 as a place that gets activated just adjacent to Pacific Avenue, gets activated for various festivals, celebrations, events, and the weekly midweek farmers market, where lots and lots of local Santa Cruz County organic farmers come and sell their goods, and lots of people have a history of gathering there during that time. And it's one of the few things that still kind of brings a lot of people together in our current kind of, technocratic society where everyone's, slowly becoming more and more integrated with technology and less with community. Lot 4 has kind of laid the framework and provided that base location for us to gather over all these years. And the trees are infrastructure for that. They are very large. They provide a huge amount of shade. They're beautiful. And they have taken, I don't remember, John, if you remember, but many years. I think one's at least over 100. They're very old. They're very big. And that's not the sort of infrastructure you can just put up in a year with a new build. This is established roots, if you will, and not just physical roots, but roots within the community. And so it's one of the things that I think a lot of us are very sad about losing. But
yes,
it was one of the attributes we really thought could be maintained and kept, and been kind of a central part of it becoming kind of a central park.
Yeah, and the habitat for the wildlife, the birds. That is so important. The cooling for the area, the trees are really important.
Yeah, it's ironic that we would be collecting signatures for Measure O, which was the alternative to what they're doing, and we did a lot of signature collecting on Lot 4.
Yes.
And people would look at the trees and look at the possibility of an 8-story building there.
Yeah.
And sign the petition to get the initiative on the ballot.
And that was Measure O, which got 42% approval.
Right, and it's worth going into a little bit of detail about Measure O, because Measure O basically provided an alternative that met all the same goals as taking away Lot 4, but leaving Lot 4 for a farmer's market and plaza. It designated other city-owned lots, and Lot 4 is a city-owned lot downtown, to build affordable housing on. Mm-hmm. We're all in favor of affordable housing downtown. Mm-hmm. It provided for renovating the library at its existing site, and it's worth noting that the library, despite all the dire claims during Measure S, is still with us, still a fine building.
Yeah.
It can use upgrading and refreshing and renovating, but as the city itself understood and the library, it could have been renovated.
Yes.
And so that was the other thing. And then not having the parking garage because it was unnecessary and there was no demonstration need for it.
Yes. What is the status? I've been reading some of the city's newsletters and things. Do you want to talk about what is the status of this project now?
Well, they in order to get the federal money, assuming it's still there, for the affordable housing, they need to break ground by June, June. And so they are on an urgent basis to do that. And the great paradox of all their claims about, this is going to save money to build a new library instead of renovating the old one, is now they've spent virtually all the money they have available from Measure S that was designated to renovate a library. And they've spent it all, and they don't have enough money to finish the interior of the library.
Oh, my.
Which people don't seem to fully understand, but they are trying to go out now and raise funds from the public for something that we've already been taxed for.
Yes.
And it's a deep paradox that we should be ending up with this entire project, and I'm all for affordable housing, but it didn't have to be there, ending up with this project, taking away the farmer's market, taking away the trees, and doing it in the name of the library, and they don't have the money to actually finish the inside of the library part of the building. It's baffling to me, quite frankly.
Yes. Lira, do you want to comment on this?
I mean, John said most of it. I find it very, it's ironic and it's very sad that basically what we're going to end up with is a very, very large shell. So they're going to move forward with building the shell, and they're hoping, fingers crossed, that they're going to be able to fundraise enough to then actually be able to fill the shell with all the various infrastructure that we need to actually have a functioning library, which is quite a bit. It's not just all the renderings that they showed during the Measure O campaign when they were trying to ensure that it did not pass. They showed lots of renderings of very high-end finishings on the inside of the library, and there was always a tiny little asterisk with there's a scale to what could be the actual final finishing, and it's going to be the very, very low end of the scale when it finally gets finished, and who knows when that's going to be, because they don't even have the money for the lower end of that spectrum. So it's just sad. And I mean, at one point, I'm still very sad that what we worked so hard to create together, a beautifully renovated library where it is. I mean, the renderings that the same exact architect who is designing the new library build on Lot 4 did beautiful plans for how the renovation could be where it currently is, with this huge central skylight, where the lower floor went straight up to the top floor, for that central skylight. I mean, there were so many different aspects to it that were so friendly and beautiful, and it's very sad that we're not going to be able to ever see that happen. However, we are in the position that we're in. And so I still feel remorse, but also at the same time, I've transitioned to this is our future, it is at this library. And so I actually really hope that they do fundraise as much as they can. We do need a library. There are still a lot of people who do rely on a library.
Yes.
A physical library downtown. It's the main central branch of the whole county's library system. And it's crucial that we actually get it done. And so it's weird that now there's this part of me, that's my goodness, I hope they do raise the money, when it's after all that time of trying to stop it, now it's we are going to, this is what's going to happen.
It is what it
is. I hope it is what it is, and I hope it does get completed.
Yeah. The downtown library is the only library in the entire county that is open on Sundays. It is the only
I did not know that.
It is.
Wow.
The Watsonville Library is not open on weekends at all.
Right.
Other branches are open limited hours on Saturday, but the downtown is the only library in the entire county open on Sundays. We have a caller. I don't know if you want to accept a call. It's Judy talking about Lot 4.
Sure.
Is that all right with you, Lira?
Oh, yes, please. Yes,
All right,
please.
let's see if we can bring Judy on. Hello, Judy. Can you hear us? Hello?
Hello?
Hello, Judy.
Hi, yes.
Hi,
Yes, hi.
you're on the air on Community Matters with John Hall and Lira Filippini. Welcome and thanks for calling. What would you like to say?
Well, I don't want to take up the time that you're going to talk about south of Laurel, but the library, Measure S, they knew Measure S was never going to be enough at $23 million to build a 44,000 square foot library, which is what the downtown library is. And they claimed that they only could get that size in a shared facility with the garage. Well, the new library won't even be 44,000 square feet. It will be smaller. And as John said, the funding, has only been enough for the shell. And also, they make a big deal out of the child care facility that included, but as far as I know, it will only serve like 16 children. Also, subsidized housing, affordable housing. I prefer to use the term subsidized housing. And now we also will be subsidizing the parking garage at $28 million for not much of a net gain of spaces. And lastly, the new farmers market will be moved, and we'll see how that works out at this temporary spot. And we'll see how much community input is actually allowed to what replaces the old library. So there's a lot of issues, unresolved issues, and pretty much the city says, oh yeah, we have community outreach, but they do what they want. So it's discouraging. Okay, that's all. Thank you.
Thanks, Judy.
Thank you, Judy. Thank you. Why do you think the city wants this project so fervently?
Well, it's like getting, you don't want to look, especially if you're a vegetarian, you don't want to look at a sausage factory and the work that goes into making sausage. And that's certainly true with the city as well. I do think that they have a out-of-date vision and poor execution, even when they're more up to speed on city planning. And I think that goes back, I've searched for an explanation for a long time. Partly, I think Santa Cruz as a community did not get a strong civic culture that took hold in its early years. It was basically a frontier port town with all that might mean about the coming and going of boats, and it was basically export of lime, livestock, and lumber, the 3 L's, and then in the latter 19th century attracted tourist development, which you can see continuing in the boardwalk and so forth, and the beautiful coastline. And then really it was a pretty conservative small town up through the arrival of the University of California in the 1960s. And I think, it's striking. It doesn't have the public plaza that, say, San Luis Obispo has, or Sonora, or many other small, similar-sized cities.
Even Watsonville has a nice plaza.
Yeah, exactly. So there just wasn't that civic idea of making a city beautiful. And the long-term vision, I think, has been driven by real estate interests that own quite a concentration of land in downtown Santa Cruz. The Seaside Company and some other large landowners own some of the south of Laurel area that we'll probably be talking about in a few minutes. And it's their vision or their drive for profit, for maximizing profit off of land, I think, that has had an inordinate effect on city politics. It always seems like public gets to comment after some backroom deal has already been, at least
the truth.
The outlines of it have already been agreed on the part of developers and people in the economic development department of the city. And they're very, they're close. They're part of a power elite. So it's part of a broader phenomenon that's called the urban growth phenomenon, where cities basically increase their tax revenues by developing the urban growth machine, I should say.
Yeah.
They increase their tax revenues by getting denser property and getting things included within the city and suburban sprawl and all the rest of it in many cities around the country. But it takes a special form here where you're under pressure from San Jose, people wanting to commute to San Jose from lovely Santa Cruz, and from the tourist industry, which has quite a big stake in what happens here.
Indeed it does. Lira, why do you think the city of Santa Cruz wants this to happen so much?
Well, I think that, John touched on a lot of the key elements there. But I also think that different city officials and different city employees over the years that these various plans have been discussed, because, of course, when there's the idea of rebuilding the library in a new location, the immediate question also, which we haven't gotten to yet, is what would happen with the current library location? I do believe that there were some very known incentives going on behind the scene as to why that lot being up for revision would have been beneficial to certain people. And I do think it's different. I think different employees from the different departments see different benefits, and different city council and mayors have seen different benefits. And there's, all kinds from what John was talking about, which we actually do. We've been working in a deficit for many, many years. There's actually entire articles by law firm. There's this one article by this law firm. It's a whole it's a very large web page where they use the city of Santa Cruz as the poster child explaining the pension crisis and the budget running in a deficit and how to climb out of that. And most people have no idea how bad it really is in Santa Cruz. But there is real incentive for generating more tax revenue. Yeah. And every time you redevelop a piece of property, it gets reassessed and the taxes go up a great deal. And a lot of people don't realize that the city actually gets a big chunk of that. And every time you increase the floor to area ratio, so that means there's more stories for the footprint of the building. That's a huge part of how that tax revenue is then going to be calculated. And so developing these, an 8-story building is going to really increase the value, the technical value of Lot 4, as an example. But also, it's, as I think John put it a year or two ago, what that building's architectural style represents is defensive architecture. It's this idea of, maximizing the square footage of the space, of the actual blocking, the full footprint of that building. It does not invite you to hang out right outside the doors. There's no beautiful entryway, where you walk up and there's benches to sit, and there's and you can understand why some people might be worried about that. We do have a very large number of houseless individuals in our community, and I do think that there are a lot of people who are trying to help and help rehouse people and help people get out of these situations. However, there is also a concerted effort to, quote unquote, kind of clean up the streets, not encourage people who are unhoused to be hanging out around businesses. And the current library has, a really large area for people to kind of hang out around it, and it's right next to City Hall. So there, and it could be said that I'm kind of extrapolating. However, if you actually read some of the previous library directors' memos during the process of looking at whether they should rebuild a library in a new location or renovate this one, there was a lot of language that was very clearly, specifically about that. So,
yeah, this goes back really to the earthquake recovery after '89, when there was a proposal to build a park on Pacific Avenue, and Cynthia Matthews, who has been a mayor and city council member of the city of Santa Cruz, at that time said, we really cannot have that kind of a public space. It will attract undesirables.
Oh my! So
that's 1989, 1990, all the way straight line through to today. Go. This is the way they're designing their city to be inhospitable in general.
In general, yes.
And that continues with the projects on Front Street, which are right up to the sidewalk, and it's going to be a huge traffic mess. It already is on Front Street. I tried to drive over on Front Street today. It's a mess, and it is so uninviting as a street. You can't call it a streetscape. It is a canyon. It is a canyon with cement sidewalks and asphalt roadway and buildings right up to the edge.
Yes, it is a canyon. People who have not been downtown Santa Cruz in a while, you need to go take a field trip to really get a sense of what we're talking about, because it is shocking. And this is not the only project. This library parking garage is not the only project. There's another massive one on Ocean Street. There are many, many in the pipeline, and they are all very tall buildings. Do you think that the city wants the parking space for some of these other larger projects as a pressure relief valve, if you will, for parking requirements? Do you think that could be part of it? Because it really did start off as a parking garage, and they kept adding things to it, with the affordable housing being and childcare being the most recent.
I think they decided that the parking garage was going to serve other needs that they had not yet specified at the time, but they built, and city council members raised their eyebrows at this at the time, but they approved the 100% affordable housing building across Cedar Street from Lot 4 without having any parking at all. And since then, of course, state law has made it, and Lira knows much more about this than I, but has made it so that you don't have to provide parking for housing units that you're building anymore. So.
Yeah. Lira, do you want to talk about that a bit?
That I find one of the most disturbing parts of all of this is that, the state is a big part of what's going on. It's, the push with the RHNA, the Regional Housing Needs Allocation, where the state has mandated that every city and county develop a certain number of housing units at different income levels. They've also passed an avalanche, number of new state laws, assembly bills and Senate bills, since, I forget if it's 2017 or 2018. It was SB, oh goodness! Now I almost always have this right at the tip of my tongue. No, it was like the very first SB 330.
Oh, yeah.
That's the one that initiated. It was the Housing Crisis Act for the state, and they basically removed local control, because normally the state's constitution actually gives local control to municipalities, so cities and counties, for their own development within their boundaries, because each city and county has different access to resources, different infrastructure, and better knows their own needs and how quickly they can develop, without straining those resources and the associated infrastructure. So it's been really a logical, and understandable, regulation structure for all these years until that Housing Crisis Act that basically circumvented the California Constitution and gave the state control over development, over how many units would be developed, over there's a whole bunch of state laws that now allow a developer to get endless waivers for design elements, or even building envelope, so how big is the building, the massing, does it go all the way out to the street, or does it have the setbacks that are normally within your city's code? Developers now can kind of mostly do what they want. And back to this topic of the parking, it's one of the most disturbing parts of it for me is that they passed a whole bunch of laws making it so that a city cannot enforce their parking requirements for these dense housing developments. And at the same time, so normally a city could enforce that the developer is going to bring that many more people to the town, to the city. It's going to increase the population, and it's fundamentally increasing the density quite a bit. They then have to, finance and actually build their portion of parking. And parking is what? It's part of transportation infrastructure. Now, and they would also usually have to finance a little bit of nearby street improvements based on already known needs, from our transportation department. And now what's happening is that they don't have to invest in any of the transportation infrastructure. They don't have to provide parking at all. And on top of that, they only have to provide parking for commercial. So I should be clear about that. There still are requirements for if they have a commercial floor at the bottom, they have to provide a very small amount of parking for that, and that's it. But what they're also being allowed to do in tandem with these other state laws is build right up to the sidewalk, as John has brought up a couple of times, because it is startling.
It is.
And if you think about what that means is that, so if we're transitioning away from cars and they're saying you don't have to, these developers don't have to provide vehicle transportation infrastructure, then we're supposed to be transitioning to active transportation infrastructure as something we're encouraging for our downtowns and, of course, public transportation. But when you build up to the sidewalk, you are not leaving any space for the next 50 to 100 years. Those buildings are going to stay up for a long time. You're not leaving any space for active transportation infrastructure, for adequately wide sidewalks, for new pathways and paseos, for bike lanes that are dedicated, bike lanes that are safe, that have enough space. We are not planning for that needed infrastructure as we are implementing these new regulations from the state. And I see it as a really scary problem that we're going to see in our near future.
I agree. I want to touch on the farmers market that we all love. What is the plan for the farmers market with all of this displacement now? Can you tell us?
Well, they certainly, we've Lira and I have had a number of meetings with the executive director of the Farmers Market, National, and he has a vision and has pursued a vision. He would have been fine, although he felt reluctant to say so during the Measure S or Measure O campaign. He would have been just fine with keeping the farmers market where it was, developing it as a city commons, having permanent facilities for the market. Now he and the city are in discussions, fairly advanced discussions, about relocating the market temporarily, and they're going to have to be kicked out of Lot 4 starting in June if that's what happens. They're going to kick the farmers market out of there and cut down the trees, a tragedy, and relocate the market along Church Street and maybe just in front of City Hall and the library temporarily, 2-year construction period. They can't really do anything with the existing library until they get the money and the library moved into the new building, assuming that all goes ahead. And then the city and the farmers market are planning to build a permanent facility for the farmers market, possibly incorporating some of the existing structure of the library and probably adding some affordable housing in the mix, and possibly, and this may be something that city staff have had in mind for quite a while, possibly including some consolidation of city offices in the existing library building. It may be that they've been after that building all along.
Yeah. Lira, do you have anything to add?
Yes, I do. So I was actually very surprised at the last city council meeting where they met on this topic. They proposed various options and left out the option of potentially repurposing the current library structure or part of it, which I was very surprised about. And I spoke during the public comments, and one of our city council members actually did say, like, hey, I think it would be good to at least have some of the studies be done on whether that's a possibility. But what the city staff had put as the three options and what ended up being brought forward to like move forward with pursuing are various options that include complete demolition of the current library building and building a new building that is on one edge of, I believe, if I remember correctly, it actually also consolidates a nearby parcel. It's just a parking lot, I think, that's right next door to the library.
Yep.
And then building a new building on a far edge of the full combined parcel. And so there'd be a very large open space for activating for like larger events. They could also activate those streets surrounding the current library's location, as John was describing, that they're going to be using those streets themselves as the temporary location for the farmers market during this construction period. It'll be a test for whether this is going to be a long-term thing, where for really large events that whole kind of community event space could be enlarged and take over those streets for like those special occasions. But the idea is actually, the part that I love about this whole idea is that the farmers market's going to get a permanent location and infrastructure, and they really do need that infrastructure. I also love the part that, Naish really nurtured into being the farmers market director, which is that it wouldn't just be a farmers market anymore. It would become a community market space that is activated pretty much all week with different events. Mm-hmm. And then be like specifically the farmers market on Wednesdays still. Mm-hmm. But there would be a commercial kitchen most likely in the building. There would be shelter within the building for those inclement weather days that the farmers market or community market are happening. And then I think part of the second floor would most likely be, as John mentioned, new staff offices. And then there would be housing on top. And what the council kind of decided to move forward with studying are, I think, like the more moderate number of stories for housing and numbers of housing units, because one of the options that they decided to not move forward with investigating was a much larger development with a lot more housing. And so it does appear, I mean, who knows, because the staff did respond to the council member that was like, maybe we should be looking at whether we could reuse part of the library. The response was like, oh, well, don't worry. We will be still giving you information about that, but you should still choose two out of these three options. So like one of the options was never that was going to be like one of the main possible considerations. So, and John and I have seen how this goes. Usually that means it's not really being considered.
I mean, it's just, again, it's paradoxical. They started out with a building that was designed to be a library and is currently a library, and with a city lot that has trees on it and had the farmer's market and could be the farmer's market with trees in a park. They rejected that and then moved over to having a farmer's market that can't be contained within the properties themselves and has to spill out onto the streets,
Yeah.
and either reusing the library building in ways that it's not well designed for, or tearing it down. So it's just sustainable from a sustainable architecture point of view. It's a non-starter. From a city planning point of view, they could have done it better if they had started out renovating the library and would have even had a chance to expand it if they needed more square feet. They could have expanded it into the parking lot that is right next door. But instead, they chose, to me, from a city planning point of view, a less desirable option. And I'm with Lira. Given that they've made bad decisions, I hope that they can implement it, and I'm willing to advocate for ways they can implement it as well as possible.
Yeah. They've made the harshest and most expensive decisions, it seems.
Yeah.
So you've outlined what it is and your suggestions and thoughts of what could be making it better with what the city looks like it wants to do. Do you feel like anybody's listening to you at the city council meetings? How can people who care about this really get involved and feel like they can make a difference? You've created this wonderful vehicle, Our Downtown, Our Future, that is quite adept at negotiating and working things through. What do you suggest people do?
Well, I do think we can take some credit for the affordable housing being part of the project. That wouldn't have happened if we hadn't put the pressure on them. But I also think that there is something fundamentally flawed in Santa Cruz that I don't completely understand compared to city planning in other comparable cities. Because the approach you get is that there's already a well-formed decision and a well-detailed, at least, sketch of how something will be done, and the city, the public, really does not get viable input on planning, and the city staff apparently is dominated by considerations that don't really lead to optimal community building in public space and in the cityscape. So I feel like the city staff on these kinds of issues and the city council really resist any meaningful public input. You have to fight the city rather than working with the city. That's very disappointing to me compared to other cities I've lived in, similar size.
I miss Sandy Brown on the
I do
City
too.
Council.
Yeah, okay. Well, and that's the thing. You ask, what can people do? I think what people can do is find that, if you feel inspired, run for city council.
Yeah.
That's one thing.
Yes.
Because basically, you're not going to change the situation without having a city council that is more receptive to community interests.
Yeah.
And the real estate industry led the recall of Drew Glover and Chris Crone when the progressives had a majority in 2018. They did not want to see a city that had progressive-minded people in charge of the city. That says something, that the developers would be so opposed to the community.
Lira, do you have anything to add? We're down to about 5 minutes already.
Okay.
And we can invite
Yeah.
callers if we want. 265-5050. It will be quick. Go ahead, Lira, please.
So one of the things I think is so interesting about how this is all actually shaking out in the end, the final result, is we are going to have the only weekly traditional event that brings a lot of people together is now going to be directly adjacent to the City Hall. And we are going to be activating that space that is the library, where people currently go for resources and to, kind of quietly search and find things to, either if they're researching or they're interested in entertainment, instead, this is going to be an event space. It's going to be a place where people come together for celebrations, come together for various community activities, and it sounds like it's going to be activated pretty much every day of the week. And there's going to be staff right above them, like right in on the second floor of this new community market and farmers market space. So it brings, in my opinion, it's bringing the community to City Hall in a way that has never really been in Santa Cruz, except for when the Civic Auditorium was more utilized. And I think that this actually is an opportunity. It's an opportunity to just make more people aware of City Hall's existence, and that stuff is constantly being decided for them, really, and sometimes in spite of what is best for them. Right there, I think it's an amazing opportunity, just first to bring more awareness, and second to actually inspire engagement, because every Tuesday I'm sure there's going to be some sort of event there. So that's also the day that the city council meets.
And on that note, Lira, one thing people can do, we haven't had a chance to talk about south of Laurel.
Yes.
And we're not going to be able to, but anybody who is listening who is concerned about the issues that we've discussed might want to consider going to the city council meeting on Tuesday, May 13th, and advocating for limiting the existing, limiting the proposal to the existing zoning for south of Laurel, so that we don't see 12, 14, 16-story buildings being built in a place that can't handle the traffic. Yes. And is aesthetically damaging to our skyline and to our sense of community.
Our sense of Santa Cruz.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
And I do want to talk about south of Laurel on another program, and I'd like to invite you both back to come and talk about that. It's a huge project, and we'll do it before that May 13th. City Council meeting. We do have a caller, Judy Grunstrad. Do you want to accept another caller?
Sure.
All right.
Sure.
Thank you. Hello, Judy. Can you hear us?
Hi.
Thank you for calling.
Yeah, I'm sorry. Yeah, I'm sorry you didn't get to discuss south of Laurel. And as you were talking about the public space there, that could be part of the farmers market new area. It just occurred. Hello.
We're here.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Yeah. The way the city, dictates these projects from on high without, much community input. Another example is the Spruce Street Plaza that they're talking about in the south of Laurel area, which, from what I see, it's basically an intersection of Pacific and Spruce, and it's going to be concrete from what I see. So that's, is that what we want, really?
Yeah.
And where are they going to get the money to, redo this library building, as many communities do, adaptive reuse of old buildings, which is the sustainable way to go. Where are they going to get the money for that? And as far as activating space down there, that takes, staff time. Where's that money coming from? So, yeah, it could be great if they do it right.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you, Judy, for calling back and your good work. Let's try to get together next week if you're available. Or very soon, and we'll talk about south of Laurel. It's a huge, important thing. We're down to our last 45 seconds. John and Lira, thank you. John, please, anything you want to say very quickly.
Well, I think that we're going to get the city that we deserve only if we get the community engaged in understanding what it means to have a viable and vibrant community. I was driving around Santa Cruz yesterday evening, and it is an empty, vacant city.
Yeah.
And we can have a much better place than we have. And I just hope that people get engaged so that we can advocate for that.
Let's do that. Lira, last 5 seconds.
Ditto. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Let's get engaged.
Thank you.
Thank you, Becky. It's
Thank
good
you.
to be with you.
Likewise. Thank you both very much. We're off the air now. And our recording